Well, 2014, not a blockbuster year for the U.S. movie industry. So what's it going to take to get people back in the theaters? Well, who better to ask than one of the titans of the movie industry? Liz Claman at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, with the Imax CEO, Richard Gelfond. Liz.
Tracy, we've stumbled upon the one movie theater in Davos, Switzerland. It's called Cinema Arcaden. They actually have first-run films, everything from Boyhood to The Theory of Everything to Unbroken. Look who else I've stumbled upon. Rich Gelfond, the CEO of Imax. A little movie theater here.
Well, Liz, when I travel the world, I try and size up the competition. So I was wandering around Davos and I saw this, and I thought it really needs an IMAX theater badly.
Yeah, I don't even think it's the size of the actual screen. It's tiny in here, but hey, they've got the first-run movies. The state of the movie industry, Rich, the U.S. box office shrank 5% last year, and yet China's box office jumped 36%. What's going on?
Well, what's going on last year was largely driven by content. China, of course, the theater count went up by 30%, so that was a little bit aberrational in the world. The U.S., I think, just suffered from a weak film year. On the other hand, you bring good films, people will come. This weekend, American Sniper opened up across the U.S. For the 4-day Martin Luther King weekend, it did over $102 million. So that proves it. You show good movies, people will come. And with the slate coming in 15, I think you're going to see a remarkable reversal this year.
Let's talk about that slate. And the number one film we've got to really discuss here is Star Wars. Of course, shot with IMAX cameras. Could it be Avatar, Titanic globally?
I think it is going to be a breakaway hit. I think it's easy to get crazy, but you just never know until it opens. Avatar wasn't Avatars until, much closer to the release date, but people realized what they had. Certainly it has the elements to be a worldwide phenomenon. The brand name, the international distribution, the fan craziness. The people who work on the movie, JJ and Brian Burke, the producer, they tell me that when they tweet something, they just can't believe it. It's like being in the Oval Office almost.
Right, it's insane right now, and that's why I say, could it really actually beat any other film that's ever been released? But with Star Wars, and this may seem like an obvious question, but I have to ask it because a lot of big films have been released in other nations before America. Which country will Star Wars be released in first, Rich?
I don't know. It hasn't really been decided by Disney, and obviously it's completely their call. But my guess is a movie of that scale will open day and date around the world because of the threats of piracy. I think they're going to want it to open as wide as possible on the break.
I know The Interview by Sony was not exactly the type of movie that would run in an IMAX theater, but what did you make of all of that? As a theater operator, given the chance, would you have shown that movie?
I look at it at a lot of different ways. First of all, I think that Sony was a little unfair to the theater operators in general by, they were in a tough spot and then they blamed the fact it wasn't being shown on the theater operators, and I think it was way, way more complicated than that, and I think had Sony played it differently, it may have played out differently. One of the interesting takes was that it was released digitally at the same time it was released in theaters. And as you know, that's an experiment that many people are trying right now. So it's very complex. I know a lot about it, and I know just enough to get myself in trouble. So I think I'm not going to go farther.
Well, then let me ask you to go far on this one. When you talk about what type of experiments are out there for the movie industry, what about for the Academy Awards? Unbroken was disappointed. Sometimes it's very, very hard to figure out whether a movie which is wildly popular will even get a single nomination. Are you in agreement with how the Academy runs things?
I think the Academy has to change with the times, Liz. I think when the Academy started, movies had comparable budgets, they had the same release schedules, it was more a domestic business. But I think now you take a movie, you mentioned Star Wars. I mean, it's an enterprise of hundreds of people and hundreds of millions of dollars. Whereas a film like Boyhood, a great movie, it's done with, a lot of handheld cameras. It's a small set, it's a small cast. It was very innovative the way they did it. But it's a totally different thing. So J.J. Abrams in Star Wars is running like a major enterprise, whereas smaller films like Boyhood or Theory of Everything are just much scaled down. And I wonder whether you can really judge one against another. It's almost like comparing Apple, the biggest company in the world, to a family business. It's not really fair, and I think the Academy is losing a little bit of relevance, and I think maybe there should be two categories, Liz. One for these high-budget blockbusters with a lot of commercial appeal, and one for the indies.
Who's the number one person you want to hear from at Davos this year?
Oh, that's so complicated. I think probably, I don't know if he's here, but it would be Vladimir Putin, because I'd like to know what's going on in Russia.
A lot of people would. Good to see you, Rich. Thank you so much. Rich Gelfond of IMAX, waiting on the big release of Star Wars. Tracy, I will send it back to you.
Thank you, Liz.